And I knew that the rest of my life was going to be about honoring that and memorializing that. And that's when I just kind of shook my head to the reporter and said, no, my sister was full of love. She never would have wanted the death of another human being to be her memorial. And that ended up on the TV, and oh, Jennifer Bishop Jenkins is against the death penalty, and it all went from there. It was an amazing career that came. But just a little bit about the killer, that he was a sociopath. He was very wealthy, bright, but got a thrill and a rush out of committing crime. His parents always bailed him out and never held him accountable. He is now serving 3 life without parole sentences in the Illinois Department of Corrections, and he is one of the many young men embroiled in this, as am I now, unfortunately, embroiled in a national debate about the sentencing of juvenile offenders to life in prison without parole. I did become an activist, very much compelled by my sister's, I feel, mission that she charged me with. I work against the death penalty. I was on the cover of the Tribune magazine for saying that I forgave the killer. You all notice who these, do you guys know who these men are in the upper right-hand corner? Who knows who those men are? Who is he?
Mayor Daley and Brady.
Jim Brady.
Jim Brady.
Yes, that's Mayor Richard Daley of Chicago, and Jim Brady, who is the, who was President Ronald Reagan's press secretary that was shot. I had the very great privilege of working for him and with him for many years, and I still do. A very great man. Oh, you guys will laugh about this one. I gotta go back for a second. This press conference down here at the bottom, where I'm with all these victims at the hospital, just to the left, I shouldn't have cut him off, is Rod Blagojevich. I shouldn't have cut him off, but next time. A wonderful redemption of this tragedy in my life, and I don't believe that God gives us the tragedies. Human beings choose to do these great evil things. But I do believe that God allows us to redeem these tragedies. And redemption of tragedy for me, besides getting to be here with you all and getting to have friends like Marietta, the real redemption for me is that I got to meet this man, Bill Jenkins, whose son was murdered in Virginia in 1997. He's the author of the book, What to Do in the Police Leave, A Guide to the First Days of Traumatic Loss, which you can get. It's the best book for victims out there, and it has been an amazing, amazing gift to me to work across the country, Bill and I together on this team. His son was shot and killed in a robbery, and he's, being your classic college professor, he wrote a really good book to deal with it. Okay, let's talk briefly, very briefly, about what victims are. Just so you know, there's 2 aspects I want to focus on today. One is the legal aspect, and the other is the psychological. Legally, being a victim is a term that is recognized in law. It's the only term we've got, and I really get tired of this sort of whole, don't play the victim, or, oh, victims, you're whining because, oh, you're being the victim, and, it's like a disempowering thing. No, the victim is the word in law for a person against whom a crime has been committed. If you've had psychological, physical, property damage done to you because of a crime, you are a victim. That's what the law calls you. There's no pejorative to it. There's no disempowering to it. I'm a victim, and I'm the least disempowered person I know. It's not disempowering to be a victim, and I think our movement needs to own that word a little bit more. I've been frustrated with its misuse. The other thing that's important to note is what happens to victims in their brains. There is actually something that happens to anyone that has been through a trauma. And it may not be a homicide, it could just be another kind of trauma. Maybe your house is blown down by a tornado or something. But a trauma has a very specific kind of impact on the brain. And so one of the things that is important to understand about victims is that they are neurologically and psychologically different than everybody else. Because of, and it can vary depending on the seriousness of the crime and the seriousness of what happened to them. But there is a permanent effect that is led to it. And if you've ever taken psychology in college, maybe you've heard of Abraham Maslow and his hierarchy of needs. This is a description of what a healthy human being looks like, their needs being met. And if you understand Maslow, each of these, you have to have the one below it in order to have the ones above it. You can't be working on your master's degree if you're starving to death, okay? You have to have these in order. And what happens with victims happens is that this rung right here, this very basic safety and security needs, is literally ripped out from underneath them. And everything above it topples. Okay? And so just think about that in terms of your interactions. It's just important to note. And obviously I'm flying through stuff that most people get, PhDs in, so we're just kind of skimming the surface here. But just to give you a sort of colloquial understanding of how the brain has changed. In a normal event, like we're sitting in a room having a conversation, this is a normal event. And you guys are, as part of that, you're inputting information, you're hearing my voice, you're hearing the information, and your brain actually takes information and files it and sorts it into something called schemas. Mostly it's filed away during your sleep. I don't know if you guys knew that you need to get a good night's sleep at night so that the brain has time to do its little thing that it does every night to sort these things out. But also, constantly, your senses at the subconscious level in the brain are evaluating for threat. You're looking around the room. No scary-looking people in here. The door's closed. No gunmen running by. No sirens, This feels like a safe place. You're all relaxed. You're hearing things and we're not feeling threatened. But what happens in a trauma is entirely different. And traumatic memories, there's a picture of 9/11, traumatic memories are actually an explosion of information, and our good genetic history allows us to literally open up with our senses and input tons and tons of information at one time. That's a survival mechanism, that's a good thing. That we can quickly evaluate, what do I need to do, where can I go? And people's memories of traumas are very vivid because your senses just open up and you grab in lots of information. But if I can use an analogy that I hope most of us in the room are old enough to remember, and if there's any young folks that don't, I apologize. I don't know if you know this. But how many of you have seen the I Love Lucy sketch with the chocolates on the assembly line? Okay? It's very funny. But it's the best analogy. My husband actually thought this up. I think he was right on target. That it's really exactly what happens during trauma. You guys remember that they were wrapping each piece of candy as it came down the line. They were not to let any candy go past. And they were doing so well that the manager comes in and says, "Speed it up." And then they start flying out. And they can't get them fast enough. And so unwrapped, unprocessed, they grab them and just stuff them wherever, in their pockets, down their blouse, in their cheeks, in their hair. And it's very funny, but that's exactly what happens during a trauma. The memories are not processed like memories. They are not stored like memories. They don't feel like memories when they are reawakened because they are just grabbed and shoved wherever. And they are literally located in different places in the brain than experiences normally would be, because they're just shoved wherever. And that means that they're very primitive, very powerful, very disorganized, and that they can be prompted and reawakened by literally almost any association. So you have to be really, really careful, because when they do reawaken those feelings, it doesn't feel like a memory to them. It feels like now. It feels like it's happening now, because it's not stored like a memory.